Good evening, everyone. I'm Shiloh Webb. Welcome to the Reducing Educator Burnout mini-series. Tonight is day one. This is a three-part series. If you've been part of my past mini-series, usually they go 3 to 4 nights or even mornings. And I aim for them to last 20 minutes or less. So this is just to give you really snapshots of some of my larger trainings and just tidbits of this information in a way that you can take it. I know that you're all home with your families. Hopefully you are by now. And I appreciate you taking time out of your evening to come on and watch me. Valerie, thanks for saying hi. If you are here, please say hi. I am newer to Facebook Live, not brand new any longer. A few mini-series ago, it was my first time ever going live. So I'm getting a little bit better at watching the comments while I present, but bear with me if I miss one. If you have any questions or comments along the way, feel free to put them in the chat. If you're watching the replay, also let me know that you're watching the replay. And any comments or questions, I will always go back. If I do not address them during the live feed, I will go back and make sure that I answer them. I try and watch them on a regular basis. But just like you, we have full-time jobs, right? So thank you so much. Again, this is day one of a 3-day mini series. So thank you everyone who is watching. I am just wondering for the burnout, I'm wondering, I had read recently that 40 to 50% of teachers leave the profession within the first 5 years of teaching. Did you know that? Type yes or no if you knew that. That is an alarmingly high rate. I knew that teaching or burnout in education was among its highest as it's been in a long time, but I hadn't realized that it is actually at that high of a rate. And I personally almost was part of that statistic within my 3rd or 4th year of teaching. It was a typical morning and a student had come down to my classroom to problem solve. At that time, I was teaching in the resource room, working with students with emotional behavioral disorders and autism. And what I thought was going to be a routine problem solving process with her turned into a disaster. Actually, this student had started flipping over tables and throwing chairs. And in our efforts to contain her and work on, protecting our safety as well as her own safety, she had covered me in spit from head to toe. And thankfully, not thankfully that this happened, but thankfully this happened right before lunchtime. And so that day I had actually spent my lunchtime going into the bathroom, cleaning up as much as I could, going down the road to Old Navy, which was nearby, buying a new outfit and getting back to school and teaching for the remainder of the day. Now, I had a principal that was amazing. He was very compassionate, and I know that if I would have requested to leave that day, he would have excused me. However, we all know that when we have to leave suddenly, there isn't a substitute teacher that comes in, particularly if you have a population of working with students with emotional behavioral disorders. That makes the challenges even more so, right? And there's a substitute teacher shortage alone, let alone a substitute. And that was 15 years ago. It's only worse now today. So what felt like an eternity that day, I finally got into my car, and some of you may have heard this story or part of the story, so bear with me. But I had gotten in my car and I just froze. I sat there. All I wanted to do was go back into that building and resign. I just could not see myself doing another day as exhausting as that day was. Thankfully, I did drive home that day. I had a 45-minute drive and I actually missed my commute by 30 minutes. I had just been reliving the situation over and over and trying to figure out what happened. What happened that day? What could I have done differently? What could my colleagues have done differently? And the reality is that day, there wasn't anything that we could have, maybe, in the morning we could have done differently, but we didn't see what was coming when it happened, and things just exploded. I was completely exhausted. And so for this mini series, what we're going to talk about is on day one, we're going to talk about the signs of burnout. And what happened to me was I fried that day. And in the profession of caregiving and teaching, we will never avoid the negative effects of this work. That's just the reality of it. While I seem really, really positive, and I'm not overly positive, and I have to be realistic. But what I can say is if we develop the right skills and we can become more resilient. We can stay in this field a lot longer than being the statistic within 5 years or less, truthfully. And so after that moment that happened, where I really did not even want to go back to work a whole nother day, and type yes if you have felt this way, or you know what, tell me too if you have felt that way, where sometimes you resigned or thought about resigning, or even fantasized about being a Walmart greeter. That has happened to me in my teaching days. I just thought, that might be a little bit more pleasant. And that is the reality of this challenging field. So while we're never going to avoid what it means to be burnt out, thanks, Patricia. At least I know someone's with me. Well, we're never going to avoid the pain and the suffering that comes with being a caregiver or an educator. What we can do is we can develop skills that make us more resilient. So it's really not a question of if we're going to burn. It's a matter of when in our career we are going to burn. And that is the truth. I have been in education for over 22 years, and honestly, I see the new teachers come in so excited, so enthused, and I'm sure you were all there, as well when you first started teaching, or even at the beginning of the year, and then you go through that hump and you just start becoming fatigued and exhausted. And that's usually around the time, like 2/3 way through the year, 3/4 of the way, that I think about, I wonder what it's like to stand in Walmart and greet people for a living versus dealing with all these demands. And while it's just a couple days that I might think that, or very temporarily, the truth is I do think about leaving. And educators more than ever have thought about that. A recent survey in our local district, about 55% of the teachers had reported that they had considered leaving. Now, with the impact of COVID-19 and what that has had on educators, students, and families, that presents a whole new layer of issues, particularly when it comes to the overall well-being of educators. And as you know, in this Facebook group, this is about you as an educator, your own well-being, and making sure that you are here and serving yourself the best possible. So thanks again for being here. So for this 3-day series, we're going to talk about tonight the signs of burnout. We're going to talk about how it occurs. And then on the third night, I'm going to teach you exposure on how we can begin to reverse that. So again, this is just surface layer information. I can't go into a deep dive because this information, it's 20 minutes or less. But I'm giving you as much as I can, and I will also tell you about an opportunity to continue on if you choose to in this area. So let's talk about the definition of burnout. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with Maslow. Christina Maslow is one of the first leading professors, I should say, that really looked at researchers that are on burnout as well as compassion fatigue. As caregivers, many of us experience bouts of compassion fatigue. And if it's not bouts, what happens is it turns into long-term compassion fatigue. So the definition of burnout is it is a psychological syndrome of emotional exhaustion, depersonalization, and reduced personal accomplishment. So that was back in '82. She had come up with that definition and had worked with other researchers to define that definition. It's been revisited over the years, and that is what they continue to come down to. So when we think about it, burnout ends up to be, as I've researched it and looked into more of the signs and symptoms, it typically falls in 2 separate buckets. So I'm going to see if I can share my screen here. Give me 1 minute. Hope it's not going to let me because I already started the live and I didn't put it ahead of time. So thanks for bearing with me. Okay, so I'm just going to read off my slide. If you have a sheet of paper, I want you to grab it. Just put a tally, or you can even count with your hands. I'm going to go through the signs of burnout. And it ends up in 2 buckets. It ends up in hyperarousal or hypo arousal. And I'll explain more of the differences between hyperarousal and hypo arousal in day 2. But right now I want you to think about, have you had any fear and anxiety with teaching? So right now with COVID, we might have fears around getting COVID. What happens if we're quarantined for 10 days, 14 days? What happens if our family gets it? What happens if it continues to cycle through our family and we have to be out of our classroom for 3 weeks? Are there any signs of fear and anxiety? Maybe you are feeling anxious about not getting enough work done, of not sanitizing enough, whether or not the parents are going to find you responsible for their child being sick or the entire class having to be quarantined. So I want you to put a tally if you had any signs or regular occurrence of fear and anxiety in the past 6 months. We're going to go through 12 under hyperarousal and then 12 under hypoarousal. So the next one is obsessive thoughts, the ruminating. If you were with me at the beginning of this session, I was ruminating my whole ride home. I was replaying the scenario over and over and over. I was wondering or trying to anticipate what was going to happen the next day. What could I have done differently? So I was either really anticipating what could happen in the past or reliving what happened, anticipating, what could happen in the future, or reliving what could happen in the past. Or what happened in the past. That's ruminating. So go ahead and put a tally if you feel like you've been ruminating in the past 6 months. Sleep problems. Any problems falling asleep? Maybe just constantly thinking about situations, disrupted sleep, you're waking up in the middle of the night. Those are common sleep problems. The next one, irritability or easily angered. So if someone asks you, why didn't you get something done, or how you're working on something, you just feel very defensive and you're protecting yourself, or you're feeling easily agitated by those near you or asking you to do one more task. Go ahead and give yourself a tally. Disease, and on the PowerPoint, it's dis-ease. And what that means is when we are out of alignment or ease or harmony, what can happen is we get interruptions and it results into disease. So if you're feeling like your just illness is coming on or you're having more health problems, you would want to tally yourself, give yourself a tally for this. And because I can't share the slide right now, I will definitely follow up and make sure that you have a checklist. Weight problems, any gaining of weight since COVID-19, any loss of weight. Now this may be hard because we have not been able to be as physically active, but if you are gaining weight, particularly in the midsection, where the cortisol, when the hormone levels spike, we gain weight here, you definitely want to maybe give yourself a tally. If you've been eating a lot more unhealthier foods due to the stress to help manage, you could give yourself a tally here. If you have been experiencing poor concentration since in the past 6 months, so it's really, you know that you have to get a task done, but you're so easily distracted, or all you can do is think about all the things that you have to get done and you're spiraling in your head, you want to give yourself a tally for this one. Digestive issues. That is upset stomach, common upset stomach, maybe going to the bathroom frequently, or even constipation. So it goes either way with digestive issues. Maybe just feeling like your stomach's turning, it's hard to eat, or that you're not hungry. That's another sign of digestive issues if you haven't had them in the past. Give yourself a tally if you've experienced that in the past 6 months or so. Immune problems. Are you getting sick frequently? Are you catching the common cold that's coming by? Are you just lethargic? Or another sign is mono, happens over time, too much stress. You want to give yourself a tally for this one. The next one is hypervigilance. So that just means you're hyper aware. You might be even jumpy. So if someone comes up to you or they're right behind you, you might spook really easily, or you might be really in tune or paying attention. What are people saying? What are they tuning into? How are they feeling? So you might be hyper aware of things. You'd want to give yourself a tally if this sounds like it describes you. The last one is impulsive, or even just like too involved with situations and you feel like you have big reactions. So you might emotionally respond to a situation that in the past you wouldn't have really been that involved with or felt that strongly about, and now you're becoming really reactive. So of that list, that's the hyperarousal. That is a hyperarousal sign of burnout. Of that list, of the 12, how many tallies did you have? If you are so brave and you're willing to share with us, please write your number. How many out of 12? In the opposite bucket, what we have is hypoarousal. So this is more of just, hyper is more blah, kind of, just like, when we describe stress levels, we're probably feeling 8, 9, 10 out of 10, and it just feels like that's the best way I think to describe it. Just this big bundle of energy that has nowhere to go, and it just comes out. It squishes out sideways in many ways that we don't want it to. Thank you, Patricia. Thank you, Molly. Thank you, Valerie, for, yep, we have 7s and 8s, and those are so common for everything that's happening right now. I want you to know that is really common for the pressing times that we're in. On the opposite end, we have hypoarousal, which is almost like a complete withdrawal from our situation. So again, you have 12. Give yourself a tally. If you are high on the hyper end, you might also be high on the hypo end. So please don't tune out. Procrastination is the very first sign or one sign of hypoarousal. So you're waiting until last minute, or you're spiraling and you don't even know how to get started. Therefore, you don't get started and you push it off to the last minute. Give yourself a tally if that describes you, particularly in the last 6 months. That's what we're looking for, the current signs or recent signs of burnout. The next one would be under-responsive to one's environment. So this is more of, meh, doesn't faze me. You just don't seem to be responding appropriately to the situation. So if a student gets really acts up in your classroom, you can be completely chill to the point of maybe you're not even connected to it. So not saying being calm and set back and being logic about it, I'm saying more of that disconnect about it. Give yourself a tally if you seem to be under responsive to some of the situations that most people are having some form of reaction to. The next one is completely checked out. So it's just you're not really fully engaged with conversations, you're not really fully engaged with the times, you're just kind of sitting back. And even sometimes you want to be engaged and you just can't. You're just even moments where we're highly stressed, we'll just kind of zone out in the situation of being in the staff lounge. If any of you get to be there right now under COVID-19, right? Many of them are closed. So give yourself a tally if you're completely checked out. Maybe when you get home, you know that your kids are trying to tell you something important and you can't even tune in. That would be a tally of checking out. Relational problems. So this is when you know that you need to serve those in your life, those I'm talking about those close to you as well as the students, and you just can't muster up the motivation to do it. And you just kind of shut down. That would be a sign of relational problems, or you're just not going to put in the work that you need to. The next one, dread. You just dread going to work. Or maybe you dread spending the second half of your day at work every day. So maybe the morning you get through, but then all afternoon, it is just that feeling of you dread doing that. You would give yourself a tally. Next one is isolation. This is more just staying away, sticking to yourself more and more, not making intentional connection to reach out to your colleagues, your family members, or anything like that. This is really just sticking to yourself and trying to figure out all your problems out by yourself as well. That would be a tally. Blame is the next one. And so this is more of just feeling like I am not in a position of power. What it is that my external environmental factors that are all impacting me, and it's that fault. It's someone else's fault other than my own, and that there's no control that I have over this situation. So that's where we end up blaming people, and not people. Sometimes it's just circumstances or the environment, or it's COVID-19. So give yourself a tally if you feel like that has been a reoccurring quality or a reoccurring issue right now for you. Hopeless. If we feel like there's nothing that we can do. We've just kind of given up and we've given in and we just go with the flow as much as we can without any type of excitement, curiosity, or joy for the situation. Your tally. Sleeping, lethargic. So if you're sleeping a lot more than normal, you are going to give yourself a tally. If you need tons and tons of sleep, definitely tally this one. This is under hypoarousal. The next one is chronic fatigue. And I know that they seem to go hand in hand, but chronic fatigue is no matter what you do, you're exhausted. So it doesn't matter if you have that cup of coffee that used to wake you up. It doesn't matter if you get 8 hours of sleep, you still feel very tired. It doesn't matter if you listen to some of your favorite songs, you still have that continuous part where you're just tired all the time. That's what chronic fatigue is. So the one before, sleeping and lethargic, just means that you need more sleep. It takes a while to come out of that, and wake up. Chronic fatigue it happens all day long, no matter what you try. It just doesn't seem to change. You'd give yourself a tally. Disassociated, meaning you're not connected any longer to your own feelings, mostly, as well as other people. But usually we start disconnecting to our own feelings. And this is a body's trauma defense system that you have going on, so it is meant to be protective. But it is where we just disconnect from where we're at and not checking in. So give yourself a tally if you've experienced that. And then the last one is just little to no drive, where you just can't make deadlines even when you really want to and you intend to. You just don't have that drive. You're waiting till last minute, and chances are you might not even be getting things in. So out of 12, how many did you have for the hypo arousal? If you are brave enough and you have the courage to share, please do. Again, remember, when we own where we're at, that's the first place. So then we have something to work with, and that's how we can bring about change. So that's what our mini lesson is today. We're talking about the beginning signs of burnout. What happens is we have two buckets: hyper arousal, hypo arousal. Tomorrow we will talk about how we get to this place. How did we get to burnout? And I'm going to bring in some neuroscience to you. So it's more, I get to geek out on emotions and our energy systems and all of that. And we're going to talk about, if you are feeling burnt out, how that could have happened. And then day 3, we are going to talk about the prevention of it. Of course, I will share some prevention tomorrow as well, but we're going to geek out on neuroscience. So thank you so much, everyone who joined me for today. Today was just that assessment. You learned the signs of burnout. I will make sure that you get access to this PowerPoint. I'll upload it. My apologies that I wasn't able to share it. Thank you for your grace in that. And we'll see you all tomorrow night at 7 p.m. Thank you so much for joining me. Bye. Have a wonderful night.